What's happening, folks? I'm Abby Martin, and this is Breaking the Set. So between Speaker of the House John Boehner suing Obama over Obamacare and the gazillionth hearing on the IRS scandal, to say that Congress is getting nothing done would be a severe understatement. But yesterday, the Senate actually managed to take a big step forward on one of the most important reasons why our current representative system is so toxic and corrupt: campaign finance. Seeing a 10-8 vote, the Senate Judiciary Committee voted to approve a constitutional amendment that would overturn the notorious 2010 Supreme Court Citizens United decision. Of course, this ruling solidified the notion of corporate personhood and equated money with free speech by allowing companies to give unlimited amounts of cash to political action committees, or super PACs, which then lobby on behalf of individual candidates. Now, realistically, this move is purely symbolic, considering that a constitutional amendment requires a 2/3 majority vote in both the House and the Senate. But the fact that 10 of the most powerful members of the Senate were willing to vote against their own interests for once is encouraging. Chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Patrick Leahy, even went as far as saying, quote, "I've always believed that amending our Constitution must be subject to the highest measure of scrutiny. It is something that should only be done as a last resort. When the voices of hardworking Americans continue to be drowned out by the moneyed few, more serious action must be taken." Now, I'm hardly suggesting that we should rely on the very people who benefit from this pay-to-play system to change it. Instead, we should be looking at grassroots movements from outside the Beltway. Movements like Mayday PAC, a super PAC started by Harvard professor Lawrence Lessig, that ironically is raising money to elect candidates promising to repeal Citizens United and other measures that have institutionalized money in politics. Lessig came on the show a couple months ago to talk about why the current system is so poisonous.
Any human who spends 30 to 70% of your time raising money from a tiny, tiny fraction of the 1%, you can't help but develop an intuition about exactly what sorts of things you need to say to continue to succeed in raising money from those people and what sort of issues you need to avoid. So you begin to develop a sense, like the sixth sense, of what the range of appropriate issues to approach and to talk about and to push are if you're going to continue to be able to be successful to raise money from these funders.
Now, amazingly, the Mayday PAC, which was only started in May of this year, has raised a stunning $7.6 million to date from over 53,000 individual contributors. So while the future of our political system does indeed look grim, the fact that there are people using the system's own tools to dismantle it is a bright spot indeed. Now let's break the set.
It was a terrible mistake, and we're working very hard to make up for it.
And once again, we put something on the air that's a flat-out lie.
Have you ever had sex with Governor Rick Perry?
No, wait, do not answer that.
I want you to watch what we're about to do, because you've never seen anything like this on television.
What we need is to question more and to keep it uncensored, real and raw. My simple mission is to change the globe. I'ma do it with this passion and fire with tone. These ones are hard hitting, you watching your neck, but you need to tune in, cause we're breaking the set. Breaking the set. Breaking the set.
As I've covered all week on this show, Israel has launched a now 4-day assault on the Gaza Strip dubbed Operation Protective Edge. And today, an Israeli was critically injured by a Hamas-launched rocket that hit a gas station in the city of Ashdod. While on the Palestinian side, the death toll has now surpassed 100, with another 680 injured, according to Ma'an news agency. But again, despite this gross disproportionality, the establishment press continues to distort the truth. Let's take a look at this headline from the New York Times. After an Israeli missile hit a Gaza cafe packed with Palestinians watching the World Cup. It says missile at beachside Gaza cafe finds patrons poised for World Cup. That's right, those Gazans were just inviting that deadly missile to tea. Seems like quite an inappropriate way to describe a massacre, doesn't it? Well, thankfully, widespread outrage has forced the New York Times to change the headline to a somewhat more appropriate but still bizarre: "In rubble of Gaza seaside cafe, hunt for victims who had come for soccer." But see, this example is only a microcosm of the disturbing way this entire conflict has been framed by the mainstream. And it's the willful one-sidedness that is forcing people out in the streets to voice their opposition. In fact, all over the world, thousands are joining in protests from London to Oslo, with slogans such as "End the siege on Gaza" and "Freedom for Palestine." Right here in Washington, D.C., activists join in solidarity at a large protest in front of the Israeli embassy, led by the grassroots organization Code Pink. Look, I understand that this conflict has led to unbelievable tension, suffering, and tragedy for all those involved. But perception is everything. And if we let the media dictate the narrative, it does a great injustice to any efforts at diplomacy and peace. Because as much as we might want to deny it, the fact is that Israel is the largest recipient of U.S. aid to the tune of over $3 billion a year. So what happens over there is all of our problem. There's no better way to express frustration with the current system than splashing an image in a place where the public's forced to see it, which is exactly what street artist Gilf does in places all around New York. The image here is just one example of her powerful body of work that mixes activism, art, and cutting political commentary. Joining me now is Brooklyn street artist herself, Gilf, to discuss her art and advocacy. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Abby. How are you?
I'm great. And so the vast majority of art is not political. What drove your passion for symbolic political critique?
Well, I started putting work out in the street in 2008 in direct response to the Bush administration.
That's awesome. What was it about?
Just the amount of terrorism I thought was happening in Iraq with the torture of the prisoners and a lot of the things that I saw happening over there. I couldn't get behind, and I was really questioning, you know, the dialogues that were happening in our media, and it just none of it made sense to me. So, you know, I was talking to people and friends, and nobody wanted to listen. Everybody would change the topic of conversation, and so I was left to express myself visually.
Yeah, absolutely. Street art can be territorial, even dangerous. I mean, it's a practice largely dominated by men. Do you think it's been harder for you as a woman to establish your name and make a space for yourself in the medium?
I definitely see the sexism that exists in the streets. I think a lot of times people don't take me seriously because I'm female. But, you know, if anything, that just fuels me to work harder.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look at some of your different artwork. You've done a lot of work from wrapping gentrification and progress banners around buildings to destroying a kitchen in an anti-gentrification protest. As a New Yorker, what effects have you seen gentrification do in your city, and why is it an issue that speaks to you so much?
Well, New York is a very unique place. You know, it's a birthplace of so much creativity, and so many of the, you know, the arts are so concentrated here. So when I see things like the rents since 2000 have been increasing to 75% in the last 14 years, you know, you see a lot of creative people being pushed out because, you know, we're, you know, starving artists, or however you want to put it, and a lot of us are just surviving and not thriving necessarily financially. So when you see, you know, places like 5 Points, that giant building that I wrapped, you see those sort of like artistic meccas and institutions that have been around forever disappearing so that they can put up, you know, glass structures with, you know, luxury apartments. You kind of have to question what's the motive and what's our city turning into? How is this changing, you know, the environment, and how are we supposed to coexist in this sort of situation? So.
Right. I mean, every city that I've lived in the last 5 years, it seems like they're just putting up these high-rise apartment buildings, pushing all the people out of the centers of the city. And it's like, you're not, I mean, you're just pushing them out so rich people can't see like the reality of what's going on. And let's take a look at the amazing clip of you smashing the hell out of this kitchen. Oh, what drove you to create this piece of work?
Well, it was it's an abandoned building that was getting ripped down to make way for these condos, and a friend had kind of gotten access to the building, not necessarily legally, and so a lot of us just came in and we were all going to put work up, and I decided to just take over this kitchen because, of all places, what speaks to a family more, and like where is it more of a communal space in the kitchen? That's where you make memories, you cook together, you talk, you know, you fight, you argue, you're a family in that room specifically. So I felt the need to kind of destroy those memories, and you know, to recreate a kitchen and then to take it apart, all in the name of progress. Just it just felt, I don't know, the way it needed to go.
All in the name of progress. It always is. And I love that your work is so varied, covers so much ground. Let's take a look at Copper Green, an outline of the famous image of the Abu Ghraib prisoner with the Department of Homeland Security phrase, "If you see something, say something." Why did you bridge these two concepts?
Well, I felt we were, you know, saying one thing to our citizens and doing another abroad. And, you know, I felt the government wasn't, you know, being honest with the population. If you're going to be doing those sorts of things, you know, we should have a say in whether or not we find this to be okay. And obviously, I felt like we were misguided and doing things that weren't right, and I was saying something.
Yeah, no, I love it. Oh Yeah is another one of your works that shows the Statue of Liberty drinking Kool-Aid. And do you think nationalism is a hindrance to the evolution of empathy and consciousness?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I think a lot of people get that rah-rah Americana sort of mentality, thinking that we can do no wrong. But in the last few years, I feel like that's sort of starting to unravel, and I think people are starting to really become more informed and more aware, and you know, shows like yours are what are doing that, so thank you for that.
Thank you so much. And the first work I saw of yours were these amazingly complicated mazes. First, they seem purely abstract, but upon closer examination, they display words and phrases. How did the concept manifest, and how do you even map them out? We have about 45 seconds left.
The concept is really about, you know, kind of getting lost in your world, and also giving those sorts of words strength and power by kind of, you know, exponentially growing through those lines. So it's just about seeking deeper, reading between the lines, and trying to see past what, you know, may at first glance be something simple.
And how the hell do you seriously map them out? Because as an artist, I'm like looking at them, they're incredible.
Start from the inside and work out.
Yeah.
That's how it goes. Yeah.
Awesome. Drop your website real quick.
It's gilfnyc.com, GILFNYC.com.
Thank you so much. Street artist, Gilf, really love your work.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Coming up, I'll feature an exclusive performance by hip-hop artist Sage Francis. Stay tuned.
Are you like me? Do you want your comedy news with some teeth? Want your comedy news to be a bare-fisted, no-holds-barred fight to the death? Like a truth vampire biting into the necks of the corporate elite and the billionaire freaks while they're going, make it stop! Well, that's what you get with my new show, Redacted Tonight.
Was that too much? I think that was too much.
10 years ago, I heard a song that deeply resonated with me in articulating my frustration with media and politics. That song was called Makeshift Patriot. It was written by an incredibly talented hip-hop artist named Sage Francis. Francis is a prolific lyricist who's broken through almost every genre, from slam poetry to what's been dubbed indie hop, considering that Francis was the first hip-hop artist to sign with punk record label Epitaph. Now he runs his own independent company called Strange Famous, and I was lucky enough to have him in studio joining me earlier to perform a song called Vonnegut Busy from his new album, Copper Gun.
Of all the words of mice and men, the saddest star it might have been. Of all the words of mice and men, the saddest star. I like for my shoes to look like they've been walked, in my house to look like it's been lived, in my car to look like a coffin that's been driven off a cliff, my career like a non-stop graveyard shift. Don't clean the crime scene cause time means money.
Don't need Visine when my eyes seem bloody. I see dead people.
But who doesn't?
We walk undercover, deadpan, blending in with other human puppets. Discuss nothing but the sports and weather. If I stare long enough, they all morph together, and then I freak out. It'll blow my cover, so I just keep out. Now we don't know each other. I'm on the road to recovery.
No GPS.
I'm hoisting my sails to the sea breeze rest. Shut wind if you wanna play a hate. Day to day I use my fear. I'm falling asleep to stay awake. I appear psychic like I'm not a psychic. You're just predictable with no fight left to fight it. If you write it, they will come with a red pen and taser gun. Do something.
I like for my shoes to look like they've been walked in, my house to look like it's been lived in, my car to look like a coffin it's been driven off a cliff, my career
like a non-stop graveyard shift. Shift through the ashes in search of survivors, digging up the earth, filling urns with dirt for what it's worth. I'm richer than a cemetery soil. You slant drilling to get my midnight oil. I've been moonlighting as a daydreamer. I'm at the wheel of an AC. Hey, Mr. Gatekeeper, call me Keymaster.
No homeowner.
1, 2, into the 3, into the
foreclosure.
They said the war was over,
but we knew it wasn't.
They wanted more soldiers,
so we said sure.
Here's a fresh batch of people with setbacks. The poor folk, in fact, they're all broke
because of your debt traps.
Picking the pockets of people who probably needed the systems most. Selling them lies, selling them out, sending them off to a distant coast. Telling them anything anyone left for the possible that is receptive to. Breaking a promise and negative worth, but there's nothing left for you.
Gotta buy to stay alive.
They punish the payment delay.
Then they charge you with a low balance.
Then they ask why didn't you save?
Too long we took it on the chin.
Too long we took it to our grave.
Now we take what we can get.
In a livable minimum wage.
Do something.
Yeah, it might have been.
Do something.
It might have been.
Do something.
Of all the words of mice and men, the saddest star.
Vonnegut Busy.
Do it, mess up my mind.
Vonnegut Busy.
Do it, mess up my mind.
Lord Grunge.
Do it, mess up my mind.
Vonnegut Busy.
Do it,
keep it coming. Keep it
mess up my mind.
Do that, do that, do that, do that, do that. Do that, do that, do that,
Vonnegut Busy.
Do that, do that, do that, do that.
Mess up my mind.
Hold up. We gang up on bully types as if that isn't what a bully's like. Inspiration strikes like your union. I write these lines just to cross them. I'm concluding if my mama don't want her, she never has to work again. Never ask me why I spread myself so thin. Thin to flirt, dirty with the pen. I flick my tongue on its bottom. I promise writer's block ain't never been a problem. Probably make the columns wanna pop out as a pain relief. Sometimes it's what you don't say that says the most.
To say the least.
Idle feet of the Devil's Fetish Club. Highly exclusive spot none of us are members of.
Dante's a scrub.
Drink them out, the van and steamrolled them. 2010 had a couple dreams stolen. Me and Pete Dolan. Relocked and reloaded. It feels like you're going through hell.
Keep going.
Feels like you're going through hell.
Keep going.
It feels like you're going through hell.
Keep going.
And as they say, may the bridges that we burn light the way.
I like for my shoes to look like they've been walked in, my house to look like it's been lived in, my car to look like a coffin it's been driven off a cliff, my career
like a non-stop graveyard shift.
I like for my shoes to look like they've been walked in, my house to look like it's been lived in, my car to look like a coffin it's been driven off a cliff, my career
like a non-stop graveyard shift.
I like for my shoes to look like they've been walked in, my house to look like it's been lived in, my car to look like a coffin it's been driven off a cliff, my career
like a non-stop graveyard shift.
Do it, mess up my mind.
Vonnegut Busy.
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 You started Strange Famous Records in 1996. What compelled you to start an indie label all the way back then, and how hard was it to get off the ground?
Well, it didn't get off the ground until like many years later, but in '96, I was introduced to the hardcore punk rock scene, and they were all releasing their own records. There was no major label putting out stuff like that. And it inspired me because that whole time, from childhood until I was in college, I was like, when is a major label gonna sign me? And it was obvious that wasn't gonna happen unless, I had to like get stuff in motion on my own. It just inspired me. I watched them print their own zines. They were a self-sufficient subculture that hip hop was lacking. It was like all of hip hop was run by like a certain couple companies, and that's all the same artists you listen to. The good thing about that is like a collective experience, because people who came up listening to hip hop, we all know the old LL Cool J records, we all know the old Run DMC, Public Enemy, but eventually when the indie scene in hip hop started to explode in the late 90s, early 2000s, then everybody started putting in the legwork to get their material out there, and you know, Napster and file sharing companies that allowed for people in Sweden to hear my music when I didn't have distribution. Like that certainly kick-started the indie scene.
You said that corporations have extracted intelligence from hip hop. I wanted you to elaborate on what you meant by that.
Yeah, well, for many, many years, I think that they decided to promote and push artists who appeal to the lowest common denominator was the fastest and easiest route of getting an audience who would spend money for the albums. Like, yay, capitalism, but like, there's other things at play that like Russell Simmons, I think, has been put on blast recently by Chuck D about this stuff. Hot 97, a lot of other companies who were big tastemakers in hip hop early on, who went the very easy and cheap route later on. They deserve criticism because, well, they were lucky to be in a position where they were when they were in it, when everything was brand new and fresh. And they did push artists like Public Enemy who changed like the way people think about hip hop and music and for positive change. And then for everything to just get so cheap and watered down, and that's all they cared about, it's all they pushed. It's like there was no dialogue about like, how do we better this? Like, look what it's doing to the communities and where hip hop originated from. It's like, how are we giving back to those places? Like, that's beyond me. I don't feel like that's my position to talk about it, but I do think that they deserve a lot of criticism.
I have to talk about the song because that's what turned me on to you, Makeshift Patriot, back right after 9/11. You wrote the song a month after 9/11. You released it the same exact day. It's talking about everything from the media analysis to the U.S. funding terrorism in the past. How the hell were you so prescient and you did not get sucked up into that patriotic fervor so soon after the event?
I think, because I wrote it soon after and then recorded it and released it on 10/11, but I was kind of still fresh out of university. I graduated with a degree in journalism, never pursued it, but at least they taught me the ethics of journalism. So then when I saw how the story was being presented, not only did it just kind of like, the red lights were blinking, like something was wrong. The way they were presenting the story was wrong. The way people around me were talking was wrong. It's like people were just nasty and very scared. And I was scared too. I mean, I remember being very scared. But I was scared of not like a Muslim terrorist mostly. Like I was scared of what people were doing around me. I wanted to document the fear of the whole thing, of everything. Because I know those moments get washed away. I think history gets rewritten so often. I was like waiting for someone else to come out with the song. I was like, who's gonna speak on it? But everyone was just waving the flags, and it was the echo chamber of you know, what was being said on TV, and I felt it was wrong. And I always thought it was hip hop's place to be that other voice, to be the alternative, and to speak some sense into a confusing or wrong situation. So that was my inspiration. Obviously, hip hop taught me that coming up, but my experience with journalism also showed me another angle. So I wanted to like address that in the song, and not have it be about 9/11 per se, but that's part of it. But it was journalism as a whole, media as a whole, and culture as a whole, the fear-driven populists who just were like willing to do anything, the shock doctrine stuff. Yeah.
No, it really spoke to me, and thank you for writing. I know that it was deemed really controversial, which is insane because all you're doing is dropping these hard truths that no one else wanted to really speak
at that
about.
Time, I was wondering what was going to happen, and I felt like I was put on. I was red listed. I was, I was red flagged. Every time I fly or go elsewhere, I'm detained. They go through all my stuff, but years still to this day.
You said back in 2010 on RT actually that you were comfortable with the direction Obama was taking the country. I wanted to see if you still felt that way.
Well, I got a lot of for that, but the thing was, I felt the interviewer was steering me to talk Obama, and I wasn't ready to do that just yet. He had only been in office for 4 months, and I don't know what it is to be a president. I don't know how long change takes to happen, but so I was like, I'm waiting it out. I'm not here to like bash anyone who becomes president. I was trying to see if maybe some cool could happen.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think I'm very pleased with the direction things have been taken. And I still don't know a whole lot of what it is to be president, because I did feel like he had it in him to change things for the better. And like I said, the downward trend is just continuing to happen.
You can yell all day until you're blue in the face about don't buy from this company, and then you see that they own about 1 million companies, and then it's like, what the hell are you supposed to do? And then getting sucked into this election cycle every 4 years when nothing changes. And I think it's just mobilization, grassroots, and hoping we can try to create some alternative here. Let's talk about your new album, Copper Gone. You've taken a 4-year break from touring. Tell us what went into this album, because it's full of so much passion. It's this reflection on politics, the world, how you interact with it, how it interacts with you. Just an incredible kind of commentary there on so much.
Yeah, the album was a result of, I think, being shut away for 4 years. The kind of things that happen when you are shut away for 4 years. Media takes part in that, because I'm watching TV, I'm thinking a lot about the same things. How does that reflect in my daily life when I feel like things are broken outside, but also I realize they're broken inside? So Copper Gone was about, and the title itself references how homes around where I live were abandoned and copper pipes were taken out of it, you know, for scrap metal or whatever. So they spray painted Copper Gone onto the houses. And my house started to feel like that, and then I started to feel like that, and just everything evolved out of that, where I was like, why does everything feel like I'm just being stripped clean completely? No matter what we pay, no matter what we do, they just, people just keep taking, and that was, I think, the driving force behind the record, of my personal life, the focus, not so much politics, but, you know, politics does play a role.
Like I said, it's all political, man.
Right,
I mean,
right,
every
exactly,
lyric that I read, you can bring it back to how we interact with the world and how it interacts with us. And I love what you said in one interview. You just said, I can watch the world burning down around me, or I could throw myself in the fire. And what am I going to do? Tell people where they can find out more about you and your music, Sage.
Get my music at strangefamousrecords.com. Of course, all iTunes and all that stuff, but I don't make as much of a cut. And Bandcamp, and hopefully in stores, if you still have a record store where you live, and you could ask them to order.
Support your local record stores.
Yeah. It's fun to just sift through the CDs if you have a CD player still. See, that's another thing. They try to wipe out CD players. Like, they're making cars without them. They're making laptops without CD players. They're forcing the issue. I'm not ready for the change. Everything's going to be streaming now. It's like, I wasn't ready for the change from tape to CD. Eventually, 10 years later, I adopted it, and now they're trying to take away my CDs. Whatever.
Thank you so much, man. It was a great pleasure to have you on, dude. Sage, thanks so much.
Float on. Go away. Be extinct. Disappear. Float on. Go away. Be extinct. Disappear. Float on. Go away. Be extinct. Disappear.
The notorious 2010 Supreme Court Citizens United decision. Of course, this ruling solidified the notion of corporate personhood and equated money with free speech by allowing companies to give unlimited amounts of cash to political action committees, or super PACs, which then lobby on behalf of individual candidates. Now, realistically, this move is purely symbolic, considering that a constitutional amendment requires a 2/3 majority vote in both the House and the Senate. But the fact that 10 of the most powerful members of the Senate were willing to vote against their own interests for once is encouraging. Chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Patrick Leahy, even went as far as saying, quote, "I've always believed that amending our Constitution must be subject to the highest measure of scrutiny. It is something that should only be done as a last resort. When the voices of hardworking Americans continue to be drowned out by the moneyed few, more serious action must be taken." Now, I'm hardly suggesting that we should rely on the very people who benefit from this pay-to-play system to change it. Instead, we should be looking at grassroots movements from outside the Beltway. Movements like May Day PAC, a super PAC started by Harvard professor Lawrence Lessig, that ironically is raising money to elect candidates promising to repeal Citizens United and other measures that have institutionalized money in politics. Lessig came on the show a couple months ago to talk about why the current system is so poisonous.
Any human
What's happening, folks? I'm Abby Martin, and this is Breaking the Set. So between Speaker of the House John Boehner suing Obama over Obamacare and the gazillionth hearing on the IRS scandal, to say that Congress is getting nothing done would be a severe understatement. But yesterday, the Senate actually managed to take a big step forward on one of the most important reasons why our current representative system is so toxic and corrupt: campaign finance. Seeing a 10-8 vote, the Senate Judiciary Committee voted to approve a constitutional amendment that would overturn contributors. So while the future of our political system does indeed look grim, the fact that there are people using the system's own tools to dismantle it is a bright spot indeed. Now let's break the set.
It was a terrible mistake, and we're working very hard to make up for it.
And once again, we put something on the air. It's a flat-out lie.
Have you ever had sex with Governor Rick Perry?
No, wait. Do not answer that.
I want you to watch what we're about to do, because you've never seen anything like this on television.
Man who spends 30 to 70% of your time raising money from a tiny, tiny fraction of the 1%, you can't help but develop an intuition about exactly what sorts of things you need to say to continue to succeed in raising money from those people and what sort of issues you need to avoid. So you begin to develop a sense, like the sixth sense, of what the range of appropriate issues to approach and to talk about and to push are if you're going to continue to be able to be successful to raise money from these funders.
Now, amazingly, the May Day PAC, which was only started in May of this year, has raised a stunning $7.6 million to date from over 53,000 individuals.